So today, of course, the Seven Samurai is their film. It's an epic film directed by Akira Kurosawa. And Akira Kurosawa, one of the great Japanese directors. So really, this is our. We didn't watch any spaghetti westerns, which I normally do. So this is really our only foreign film that we're doing in the course. Foreign films are not my specialty per se. Like there's some film teachers and they're all about foreign films. I like foreign films, but I just don't watch a lot of them. It seems like there are some really good ones. Like I'm especially a fan of. I like Japanese movies. I like Korean movies as well. The Korean movie actually just won the Academy Award a year or two ago.
Parasite.
Yeah.
And it deserves it. That movie was spectacular.
Yeah, I did Parasite in this course last year. Yeah, it's a good time. It has a twist in the middle, which you don't see coming. So I know you know what I'm referring to, Will. So.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil because honestly, if I were going to give a recommendation for a movie, which I don't do very often, Parasite is probably like my number one or two that I'd recommend to people, especially for like foreign films. That or now Squid Games, which is a series, but you know what I'm saying.
I haven't. Yeah, tell me about what's that show about? I've been hearing about it. I know it's popular right now. What's that show about?
So it's really right now it's very polarized because that show is about people who have like massive amounts of debt or who are going through hard times and just don't have the money to support themselves. So essentially, the Squid Games are a way for these people to get out of debt and make a lot of money quickly. Like the total prize for them is like in the billions worth of dollars. And they have to play like these kids games, but very like Hunger Games-esque extreme versions of them. So like red light, green light, you know, everyone's seen that, everyone's played that, you know. But if you get caught moving by this first, like this is the first game, you know, if you get caught moving by the robot, you know, you just get shot. Like if you have the slightest bit of movement at all. So they're like death games. And every time somebody dies, $100 million is added to the big piggy bank that hangs up in their, you know, like basically the common area. So you're motivated to not only win the games, but kill your fellow contestants in order to get out of your debt that you've accrued. Okay, and that's really interesting because a lot of people in South Korea, which is where the film takes or where the show takes place, are heavily indebted to like debtors and just aren't the richest people in the world. So this is something that, you know, like money very much causes them to do stuff like this. And it's a very interesting analogy for society.
Yeah, we'll have to check that out. I'm surprised that's become as popular as it has.
Me too.
But, yeah.
You know, but back to like this movie, you know, it just goes to reinforce that. Like it's very surprising to see foreign films and foreign entities become popular. But I'm not that surprised that Squid Games is popular now because things like anime and like JRPGs and stuff like that are getting very popular. And you know, like more like, you know, it used to be a nerd thing to like anime and stuff like that, and you know, listen to stuff in Japanese or Japanese music, but now it's very like hip and mainstream. You know, it's like very much evolved the culture. So I think it's very interesting to watch this movie now.
Yeah, I was actually inspired to explore Kurosawa a little bit based on a video game that came out a year ago. Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
Did you play that, Will?
Oh yes, I have the director's cut. That game is beautiful.
Yes.
I know that there are not a lot of people that like video games, but if I were going to recommend a video game that was just basically a long movie that you got to play in, would be Ghost of Tsushima. Like, it's beautiful. It's so like just open and expansive, and the Japanese in it is so just powerful. Oh God, it's a wonderful game.
The whole game is pretty much a love song to Kurosawa's films. It even has like a Kurosawa mode where you can play the game in black and white.
Oh yeah, I did two playthroughs of the game, one in normal and one in black and white, and it's a world of difference. But this watching this movie is really interesting because I grew up on these old black and white Japanese movies, and so to get to watch another one, because I hadn't ever seen this one recently, so it's nice to see it. And I thought this film was phenomenal in how it betrayed a lot of the emotions that it did.
Yeah, this is a movie with a lot of depth. It leads you. It gives us plenty of time, right, to kind of sit and get comfortable with these characters.
And then we get sad whenever they die.
Right. So this movie came out in the early 1950s. So Kurosawa was doing most of his films in the post-World War II age. I think I mentioned on the discussion board that a lot of his films Hollywood would rip off, right? Just because the Japanese, because of World War II, weren't held to copyright restrictions. So, like a lot of his movies were pretty much completely ripped off by the West. This movie is ranked number 19 on IMDb on the top 250 list. So this movie's very highly esteemed by movie critics. Now, Kurosawa directed this. He did a couple of other really well-known films. He did a really well-known film called Yojimbo. That's another one. That's about a samurai who kind of walks in on two competing factions in this town. The samurai kind of plays both sides. That's a really cool film. The Western ripped that movie off with A Fistful of Dollars. So there's an example. I think Desmond, you talked about the Magnificent Seven on the discussion board.
Yeah, that's like, is that considered a ripoff?
Yeah.
I would say that's like ripoff, yeah. Ripoff or a remake.
Yeah, a Western remake, right, of this movie.
Yeah, when you actually think about it, there's a lot of action movies that really stole a lot from this movie.
Even something like the Avengers or something, right? I mean,
yeah, I think like Saving Private Ryan has like a lot of similarities to this movie.
How so?
Well, it's like there's like this group, and then each one of the samurais gets killed, and it's the same in that movie. It's like slowly each one of the soldiers gets killed as they try and find Private Ryan. And they all have like their own unique personalities and stuff, similar to the samurais.
Right.
Yeah. But, it's very common for Western culture to rip off, East Asian culture specifically. I mean, just look at a bunch of cartoons and like animated shows that we have. Like you have stuff like Neon Genesis Evangelion, and then you get shows like Transformers and, Symbionic Titan and just a whole, slew of stuff like that. It's not that Western culture isn't unoriginal. It's just we see an idea and we like it. And it's like, oh, let's recreate that. And we get anime and we think, oh, that's cool Japanese stuff. But to them, that's just their Saturday, cartoons. And so it's very interesting to see how much we copy from a culture or how much a culture is brought over here and we use it.
Yeah, I was going to say this about Kurosawa as well. Even in Japan, he is more popular in the West than he is even in Japan. Like, I was reading up on him, and it talked about how a lot of like Japanese people feel distrustful of his movies just because the Western world liked them so much. So something in a way, his movies do feel more Western world than do a lot of others like samurai films over in Japan. So yeah, he was always most famous in the West. He produced these films for the Toho company. The Toho company famously made the Godzilla films as well. So everybody knows Godzilla, right? I don't have to wax poetic about that.
Gojira.
Yeah, the Godzilla versus King Kong movie that came out of this summer, I didn't like it much. The problem with these new Godzilla movies is they spend too much time talking. I want to see Godzilla killing shit. I don't want to hear you talking. I want to see violence. So, but anyway, so yeah, I mean, there's lots to dive into with this film. We could talk about Kurosawa's directing techniques for sure. In addition to the themes and all that in the film. One thing that I was paying special attention to the way that he filmed this, like he is known as being a master editor of film. Like usually whenever somebody makes a film, they'll do all the shooting and then they'll spend months and months and months in the editing process after. That's called post-production. Kurosawa would like shoot it during the day and then he would edit it at night, right? So he would edit on the spot when he made his films. Like he had this kind of like vision, like what he wanted his movie to do. So he would just pretty much edit on the spot. And there's lots of interesting transitions and things like that in this film. He's really famous for doing what's called the wipeout transition. One of the most interesting ones I noticed, like there was one scene where they kind of like showed all 7 of the samurai like back to back to back to back to back. I don't know if you guys, it's a really long movie. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a really interesting scene where they kind of like transition, like boom, 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 boom. Nothing like that had ever been done before in Hollywood. Those sort of quick edits and quick transitions like that. Of course, you guys know from most of our early Hollywood films that we did, most of those had like fade out transitions and things like that. Stuff we watched like Casablanca or Double Indemnity or whatever. So, that's a pioneering action movie technique, right? Those sort of quick edits.
Yeah, and also just the camera techniques in this, like it was much better than and the films like Casablanca and stuff like that, they all came out at around the same time as this, but just the filming techniques made it feel so much different. Like I felt like there were certain scenes like we would get a close up on like Shushiro or Kazuku, and we would just get that like intense eye shot, and it's like he's about to kill this man, and it just gives a whole nother spectrum of emotion that we didn't get in all those black and white noir films because they didn't have those film techniques.
right? So things like close-ups, you definitely saw a lot of those here, as you just said, Will. Like they do, these actors in this film do so much acting just with their facial expressions and stuff. Like this isn't a movie where there's a ton of exposition or anything like that. Right? A lot of the acting and emotion is portrayed through the acting and not through dialogue and whatnot.
I mean, they had enough time to do that.
Right. Yeah, that's something else to mention too. I mean, this movie's 3.5 hours long. Back in the 50s, they did not have a problem doing that. Like, not just even in the West, like 50s and 60s, you had films like Lawrence of Arabia come out in America, or Bridge on the River Kwai, right? Or the Ten Commandments. Like these epic films, like they made it a whole spectacle. Right? So they would make these films 3.5 hours long, 3.5 hours long. Probably the closest film we've watched this long is The Godfather in here. And that was only even like 2 hours and 45 minutes. Right? But,
My attention span, and I can't sit there for 3 hours without getting up 30 times.
right.
I just can't do it.
Yeah, back in the 50s, like they would make it an all-day spectacle. Like they would make movies this long, and then they would put an intermission in the middle of it,
Yeah.
kind of like you're going to watch a play. Intermission, you get up and go to the bathroom and go refill your popcorn or whatever, right? So like I said, they made it a whole spectacle. I think that's a little bit of the lost art today. Pretty much everything that comes out these days is 90 minutes long. Right? If you go over 90 minutes long, you're pushing it in today's film industry.
I think that's mostly due to like us, just as a society, having a shorter attention span, and I blame that on stuff like TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can look at a post and it's like, oh, 2 seconds, not even, or like a minute long, and we just have that instant gratification. We don't have, and that's just evolved as a culture, and I think movies have had to evolve with that. Of instant gratification, and like I don't have the time to sit down and enjoy something right now. And I think it's a big reason why we've lost a lot of like more sentimental mentalities whenever it comes to like movies. Like, I'd love to sit and watch a good 4-hour movie. No, thank you, Zack Snyder. And I know this is a little off topic, but they wanted to make an 8-hour long Avengers Endgame cut. I'm like, that's too much.
Yeah, Zack, I don't know if you guys know, but you mentioned Zack Snyder just now, Will, but the Justice League film that came out in theaters in 2017 is known for being like horrendous. That's because in the middle of it, the director, Zack Snyder, was replaced because his daughter tragically passed away. But so they tried to, Zack Snyder is not a director who knows how to cut stuff. So like they cut a bunch of stuff. They tried to make it 120 minutes. It just didn't work out. Right. So earlier this year, they came out with his cut of the film, which was over 3 hours, about the length of this. Much better film. So some directors like to have that sort of room to play, right? If you're going to have a movie about 7 Samurai, right, or if you're going to have a movie about the Justice League or whatever, you need time to develop these characters, right? I mean, you need some breathing room. So, like even with the Justice League, part of the original film, right? They just didn't have enough time to give the characters room to breathe.
Yeah, but at least with the Justice League, we have the comics, so if you've read them, you have prior knowledge. But I feel like you could also say the same about Samurai because of historical contexts, which was actually something that I found interesting that you asked a question about. You didn't ask anything about specifically the history, but you asked about the relationship between Shiro and the samurai because she was androgynous. And that's actually something that's interesting. And I answered this question like this, but it's interesting because samurai were hella gay. Like samurai, Buddhist priests, monks, emperors, noble men and women, all in Japanese history, very, very LGBTQ amount, like an extraordinary amount of people were a part of it, and that's an astronomical thing to say, but it's true. 1 out of every 3 samurai was a gay man. And a lot of times they actually had female samurais that were androgynous, but nobody knew that they were female. So they always written them down as, like male dead samurai. But they would later discover that they were female. So it's very interesting to see things like that because that's something that just happened in Japanese culture. Like that was just something that existed and was very much a part of their society. But they didn't look down on it until after the Edo period, whenever Christianity was introduced to Japan.
Right. Yeah, I don't. You know more about this subject, especially medieval Japan, than me will. I'm not that well read on it, so.
The Edo period, which is the period this film takes place in, is one of my favorite periods of history. But and we see the relationship between them develop, and they obviously have sex, and her father catches her and beats her. And to those of you who are thinking, why didn't the samurai who slept with her step in a little sooner? It's because that was a honor respect thing back then. Is like he's beating her because she went against his word and what he told her, which is very misogynistic, but it's just something that happened. So he had to let her get beat a little bit, and that's why she resented him later on in the movie and walked past him and really basically spat in his face. But yeah, it was a very common practice for fathers and mothers to cut their daughters' hairs because of and people like the Chinese who would invade often, or even the Mongols who rarely got to Japan but still did. They would cut their hairs and send them to live in all boy homes so they would just blend in and not be shown as girls. They would do that up until they reached the maturity age of they have their periods and started developing breasts, because you can't hide a period for very long during this time. But it's just very interesting to see that little historical detail was included in this movie.
Right. Yeah, the fact that they do cut her hair to make her look boyish, right? I think that's that's a very Shakespearean quality too, right? Because you guys might know back in Shakespeare's theater, right, you would oftentimes have these androgynous characters, right, who would gender swap for various reasons. So Kurosawa loved Shakespeare, so I could probably see where that might be an inspiration for that too. Yeah, Kurosawa actually made a Japanese version of Macbeth and King Lear. So just if you guys ever read Macbeth in high school or something, right? He actually made a version of it.
Yeah, very many times have I read that. But I do enjoy this movie because it is probably the originator to all the movies that I love. There are just so many movies that feel like they're love letters to this movie in particular. especially my favorite movie, which is Kill Bill 1 and 2, this just feels like, like a scarlet letter to that to Kurosawa, because there's just so many overly Japanese elements in that movie that it just feels like it's like we're trying to emulate this because we love Kurosawa. And the director, Quentin Tarantino, he loved Kurosawa.
I was looking at the IMDb page here, Will. We were talking about that game a minute ago. A lot of the game's characters are named after the actors in this movie. Our lead actor, his name is Shimmer. His last name's Shimura. Shino's character, her name is her last name is Tsushima. So fun trivia for you there.
I'm gonna go re-download that game right now and play it again. I haven't played it since the new expansion came out, and I'm wanting to.
Yeah, I got the platinum trophy in the game. So
I don't have the attention span.
Great game. You beat it twice. I haven't beat it twice. I need to though. Speaking of which, too, just another sort of side. I also went to go see the new Dune movie last night.
Did that make
good.
any sense to you?
Did you see it?
Yes.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Did it make sense?
I have not
Well,
watched it yet.
We won't spoil anything.
Okay, awesome.
I read the book, there's several, but I read the first one that this movie's based on. And there's a whole dictionary in the back of the book. I don't know if anybody knows this, but you have to like constantly flip back and forth between that. But I don't know. This movie just couldn't keep me. I just felt like it was Timothée Chalamet talking for half an hour with some perfume commercials by Zendaya every now and then. Like, I don't know. I don't know. The actor choice for me just wasn't right, and it made me just like lose the plot. I mean, I know what the plot of the movie was, but like they just didn't do a very good job. It felt like a trailer for the next movie, is what it felt like. Just an hour and a half long trailer for the next one.
I thought it was a good experience. I'll just say that. I really liked the technology in the film. I was more into that than I was the actual plot of the movie.
Yeah,
I love like the weird helicopters and stuff like that. I got a kick out of all that.
Yeah, it was very nice to see the technology be actually made instead of described to me. But I don't.
Some people didn't like the fact that it had a lot of exposition, but I thought it was necessary just because it's such a dense novel. Right? You kind of have to be put into that world. So I actually found the exposition necessary at the beginning. There's like 30 minutes of world building at the beginning of it. So
yeah, which is good because not everybody has read that book. But for me, I think I just have a different perspective because I did read the book. Right. And I love the book's plot. It's very much Game of Thrones-esque in how they portray a lot of it. But I didn't think I got that feeling from this film just because, I felt like it should have been a longer movie because that type of movie that's based on a book that's hella long, you have to have a lot of exposition.
It was 3 hours long. So just like Seven Samurai here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Dune is the only movie that I could have that had a maybe be 6 hours long, just because that book is just so thick. I mean, even like Game of Thrones, which has just a couple books in the series, has 8 seasons of the TV show because there's so much that needs to be explained. And I feel like even with Dune, I feel like they could make 3 or 4 movies with out of one book. Because there's just so much in the world and the lore of it that needs to be explained for a lot of it to make sense.
But yeah, Kyle, I would recommend the movie. I enjoyed it. So
I'll
Yeah.
be excited to watch it. Have any of y'all watched the Tomorrow War? Chris Pratt?
I've not, no.
I haven't watched it yet either. They put it on Amazon Prime, and I was wondering if it was any good.
Yeah, Dune's on HBO if you don't want to go to the theaters. Yeah, but we're kind of jumping around a little bit. That's part of the charm of this class, right? We can kind of go on these tangents. Right?
Because it still relates to what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, but I want to just kind of go around the table here. It's mostly just in me and Will so far. What did you guys think of this film? Did some of you guys find it to be a slog? You guys get into did some of you guys get into the characters? Maybe some of y'all who haven't talked much yet chime in here. What did you guys make of even the subtitles and things like that?
The subtitles were hard. Because I don't know, you got to pay attention to them
And
at
the film?
first, during the film, and then but then after it goes on, because it is a 10-hour movie, you kind of get used to reading it while you're watching it. So, but it's shitty having to read them. I don't like it at all.
Right. I'm the type of person that even when I'm watching a film that's in English, right, I'll turn the subtitles on when I'm watching it.
Do you?
I do.
Huh.
I pick up on dialogue and stuff a lot better. Maybe I'm just a reader. Well, I'm an English teacher, obviously, so maybe I'm a reader, but
True.
does any of the rest of you all watch films and subtitles, even stuff that's in English?
I do. I can't pay attention unless I do that.
Yeah, I always have subtitles on.
Right. So you're the odd duck out here, Jessica. The rest of us watch subtitles.
I can't. I don't like it. It messes with I can't too much to think about. You're trying to watch a movie and you're trying to read too. And that's just too much for my head.
Right.
We're talking about sub versus dub.
Yeah. Or not even that. Just like even watching English movies with subtitles turned on.
That's not as bad.
Mm.
No, now that's not as bad. Yeah.
Personally, it was super easy for me, but that's just because I watch anime anyway, and they don't dub it till forever after the fact. So if I'm wanting to watch a new series, I have to watch it in Japanese with subtitles. But
I'm the same way. Will any of the rest of y'all watch I'm not that big of an anime person. I like Japanese video games a lot, but I've always found when I watch media like that, I would rather listen to it in the Japanese and read English subtitles than have an English translation of the show, just because the Japanese language is so emotional and emotive. I think when you put it in English, I don't think it translates really well.
I agree.
I think the thing that works better, I think animes that are comedies work better in English than they do in Japanese, because Japanese is a very serious language. So to have jokes and stuff like that you have to read and you don't get immediately, I feel like it's harder that way. But if you have a more serious thing like, the Seven Samurai, or you just have exposition and plot, it sounds better in Japanese. And if you're able to keep up and read, then that should be fine. But I either listen to it in English or German dub because I understand both, and I like to do other things while I'm watching it. You know, like because I've been watching One Piece recently, and that's 1,000 episode show. So I've been drawing in the background, and it's good background noise. But I'm also paying attention to the plot because I don't have to look at it. But new stuff I will watch in Japanese with subtitles, and I find that easier because, and too, it does have that more emotion. Like it's a much more emotional, much more stoic language than English. Like I'll give you a really good example of a balance between that is the anime Reincarnated as a Slime. It does well in both English and Japanese, but it has a lot of comedy in it that does well in Japanese, but it's also very serious at times that does very well in Japanese, and it does a very good blend of the both.
Who was it that said you agreed a second ago?
Me, Myra.
Explain yourself, Myra.
I forgot what I agreed with.
It was about preferring watching them in Japanese, but with English subtitles.
Yeah, I just agree about the emotion part. Like it was made to be perceived in that language. So when you put the English language over it, it doesn't really mix as well because they make the characters move like in certain ways to like convey certain expressions and emotions that line up with those like words. And
Right.
it just does not always line up.
Yeah, like Squid Games. They tried to dub Squid Games, and it was awful. But I've always thought that about real acting and stuff like that. You can't make that line up as well as with like animated stuff. Animated stuff is just like lip flapping. So long as it fits near the consonant or the syllable, it looks well and it fits. That's much easier to do than having a real actor with different mouth movements to English words, because that's something that's very common is with languages, you have different ways of moving your mouth. Like Freshka is something that you would never roll anything in your mouth like that with an English word. So it looks different and it's held out for a different amount of time than a word like friend, here, there. We have a lot of common consonants, but for a language like Yohitaiki, just very different.
That was pretty good.
I speak a bit of all kinds of languages. And, also too, this fits with that. Japanese and, Mandarin Chinese have a lot of similar consonants and vowels. So like this is Mandarin. Johan Macau have a lot of similar words in them. So they are going to look different whenever you're speaking them and sound the same, but are different. It's very different than what we have. So I think that's why it's hard for a lot of people to understand, reading versus looking, because if you're looking at something, it sounds different than what's being said.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject.
What did you just say, Will, when you was talking?
I just said, where's the bathroom? Very simple.
Say it again.
Jihao no no show.
That is so not simple.
Listen, I can speak a little bit of Mandarin and
That's cool.
Japanese.
I do
But
know.
don't ask me to write it. Or don't ever ask me to write in kanji or Mandarin.
I do know that over in Japan now, like if you go to Tokyo, like a lot of the street signs and stuff are written in both Japanese and English. Like the English language is famous for being like a gobbler of other languages, right? It eats other languages. So, like some linguists think Japanese might not, as a language, might be a relic of the past. in the next 50 or 60 years because English is so prominent over there now.
A lot of the reason why is because they watch a ton of our media, and it's very much taught in schools. Like, you can go to Japan, and about 40% of the teenagers and young people that you see will know a good chunk of English, enough to help you around if you don't know any Japanese. But same with a lot of other places like Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Germany. Like, English is a requirement because it's becoming basically the universal language.
It used to be French, now it's English.
Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of the natural evolution of language because, you know, the British Empire just controlled so much of the world. Like, you know, most of America was controlled by the British for a long time. So many colonies in Africa. India was completely dominated, a good chunk of China, you know, so it's just natural that English would start to develop as the world's universal language because it's the one that was most influenced on other cultures. And that's one of the big reasons why it is called a gobbler of languages.
And literary studies, they call that post-colonialism, right? Looking at literature through the lens of the English being the colonial oppressors of other cultures. Again, let's steer the ship back a little towards the film. I just wanted to ask this question, like, even of samurais, like, what do you guys like? What do you guys think of the like samurais as characters, especially in comparison with cowboys? Right, the Western and the samurai films, you can tell that there's a direct correlation between cowboys and samurai, in many ways. I don't know what do you guys make? Do you guys like the samurai? You find them interesting? But they're usually portrayed as like these stoic type characters, right? All about honor and things like that. So, what do y'all think about even like samurai films in general?
They don't answer to anybody, do they? They don't. Do they answer to like they don't answer to gods or nothing, do they?
A lot of it's grounded in Buddhism, right? So they are very religious.
Samurai were a lot of times employed by noble families of clans and stuff like that to either be personal bodyguards or lead armies. And like you said, Mr. Yeager, in your question, samurais are like a step above being a farmer, because that's very true, because you're either born into a family of semi-nobles or people who have just a good family heritage and you become a samurai, or you earn the title of one by fighting and defeating another samurai that was born into it. And that's a reason that a lot of the noble and higher classes didn't like samurais, is because they didn't know who was a peasant and who wasn't, because as a samurai, you're pretty much just a samurai. You don't have a title other than that. Your family name and all that doesn't matter, because you're a samurai fighting, one, with honor, and two, for whatever clan you pledge yourself to. And that's why nobles didn't like samurais. In fact, a lot of nobles hated samurais.
Yeah, we get that in the film through the character. You guys know how, like, in the movie The Seven, like the six of them, or their flag was a circle, and the other one was a triangle. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this character's name. How do you pronounce his name, Will? Is it the guy who acts crazy all the time? Kikuchiyo? Is that how you? It's spelled
If you want to spell it, send it to me in a comment, like a chat with me, and I'll pronounce it for you if I can.
all right. I'll do that. I'll just spell it out to everybody here. Yeah, that was the character's name. The guy who's always acting crazy in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, Cachichio.
yeah, yeah. We get that through him because he's a peasant originally.
He was a born to farmer, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he was born like he was orphaned early. We get that through the really good scene when the mother dies close to the end, and she puts the baby in his arms. That makes him like break down, right? Because he says that's this baby's me, right? So we get with his character. He's trying to like go a step above his social station, right? In even becoming a samurai. At first, he's kind of laughed at, right? But I mean, he's even portrayed differently on the little flag. But as the movie goes on, right, he becomes part of the group, right? So you can kind of see where that would even maybe rub some shoulders the wrong way over in Japan, right? Because they are very rigid with things like that. So even showing a character actually succeeding and rising on the social ladder, pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, even now, like social hierarchy is a very big thing in Japan. Like, it's a very common thing for like businessmen and stuff like that to get drunk because of how stressful, their lives and stuff are. Because in Japan, they're very much a workaholic nation. Like, if you're not working, you're pretty much shunned in society. Because that's what that's just what just how they are, and they very much have respect for their elders and people of higher stations than them. It's just a hard boiled part of their culture. And the Edo period is where that really truly started, because after you have all the Daikai clans uniting and we get the shogun and then the emperor of Japan, we get a very rigid social structure that has one down to the peasants. And that's where that really developed, because before then, everywhere in Japan was just its own sort of small nation within Japan until they united, and they didn't have that. Really, the only people that were respected were noblemen, samurai, and shugaris, which are basically like samurais that have ascended to nobility. But yeah, and the war between the noble class and the peasant was really prevalent, especially in this movie. Like we see an entire scene where a farmer is cutting his daughter's hair because of the fact that he thinks that these samurai are going to take advantage of the women here, because the nobility has always oppressed the lower class.
But does he think that it's going to make them look more manly or something? That's why he cut her hair off.
No, it's so that because he's probably used to a lot of nobles and samurai nobles, or just men in general, raping the women in his village. So him asking for their help, or them helping that village in general, that's usually a lot of times what men will take as their reward, especially like the Mongols. That's all they did was rape and pillage.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. Just a little interesting side tangent about that. Genghis Khan killed enough people to change the temperature of the planet and had enough children to where he is in about 3% of all people on Earth. But this movie is very interesting, and it shows that class struggle between nobility and peasants, because obviously we see that there are no samurai really that want to fight for them for just food because they can't give them money because they're a poor peasant town or village. So they have to pay them in food. They can't pay them with anything else. And because a lot of these samurais either come from dignified families, they won't fight for anything that isn't a glamorous reward, such as, guaranteed victory or gold or, just something precious. So the fact that they did find samurai that were willing to be paid in food, that's very suspicious. And so that's why he cut her hair, because he doesn't want her daughter to be raped.
Right. That's part of why he's so angry at the end too, right? He calls her damaged goods, right?
Yeah.
A slut, right? He calls her all these nasty things at the end, right? Because he thinks that the samurai just took advantage of her, right? Because she's in a lower class.
Yeah, which I personally think she led him on more than he did, because she felt like she took the first moves in a lot of the situations.
Yeah, I was surprised that this movie's like frank depiction of sexuality and stuff. Like it was, Hollywood was definitely not that open about it in the 50s. So even like show them in bed together or whatever, that's pretty risque for the 50s.
Yeah, like even just being in the same room as a woman by yourself as a man was very promiscuous back then.
Mm. Right, like our former vice president, right? He wasn't comfortable being in the room alone with a woman. You know of whom I speak.
Yes. This movie did a very good job of portraying like how things were back then, and I really appreciate that, because we don't get that much anymore. We don't get a lot of historical accuracy based on movies anymore, and so to have this movie, from the 1950s that has a lot of historical accuracy and just like tone and time accurate, not only fighting styles but language as well.
Here's a question. Do you guys think that maybe the Western world romanticizes samurai a little bit? Because as you said, Will, they weren't just honorable and noble and things like that. They would oftentimes like do some horrible things to the population and whatnot. So I'm guessing you definitely agree that they're romanticized a little bit in the West.
Yeah, but I mean, that's very common with Japanese culture. Like, we romanticize shinobi, samurai, and
Yakuza.
Yeah, the Yakuza and stuff like that. We romanticize that as something that's really cool, but shinobi were just assassins. We can call them ninjas all we want, but they were just assassins. They killed people from the shadows and in cold blood. Samurai fought for money, land, and titles rather than, honor. Not a lot of samurais had a deep-seated moral code or set of honors. Whatever your master believed in, that's typically what you believed in. And, that's how you got higher ranks as a samurai, and that's how you got land, titles, women, and money. And that's just typically how that went. So I definitely do think we romanticize a lot of, especially, just East Asian culture in general.
Yeah, any of you guys ever see the film The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise? I mean, y'all ever watched that?
No.
I would not recommend it. just for that reason. It definitely romanticizes them. Right. Tom Cruise becomes a samurai in the movie, right? Because their values are more in line with his than in America. So it's a strange movie. Plus, it's Tom Cruise. I like to hate on Tom Cruise. So there's that too. Except
Not a fan of Tom
except,
Cruise.
except Top Gun. Top Gun's fun.
I'll be right back.
For Halloween.
No, I've never have been a big fan of his. I can't really explain why. I just never have been. But yeah, I mean, samurai, they have the cool armor and stuff like that, right? So that's another thing that we sort of romanticize in the West. By the West, I mean the Western world, not the American West. What's some of the Kyle? What did you think about this movie? I haven't heard much from you today.
I thought it was all right. I'm not into older films like that. I don't really, it's just hard for me to get interested in it because it's so old. Like anything past the 70s, I'm fine with it. Before that, it's kind of hard to watch.
Right. Yeah, he did films up through the 80s, I think. Like I think Seven Samurai was one of his early ones. This raises another question about black and white versus color.
Yeah.
Kurosawa didn't like making movies in color, right? He thought that the black and white gave him more like opportunities for lighting and shadows and things like that. So it's kind of like how we talked about with Casablanca and stuff, right? If we put Casablanca in color, how would that be different?
Yeah.
Yeah, some black and white is a turnoff for some people. Each their own taste.
See, the storyline, I like the storyline of the movie. If it was in color, it'd be a lot better. It'd be a lot better film, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of imagine like stuff like the landscapes in the movie.
Yeah.
Like the nature, like all the flowers and stuff that you see on the ground. Like that would be really interesting to see all that in color, I think. Like you don't really get a lot of like the nature and things like that. Or even like how drab the town looks and things like that. Maybe if it was in color, you would get more of that.
Yeah.
I feel like they would look more out of place in color because like they all wore those same outfits and like they I don't know, I just feel like they kind of fit into the black and white like theme, just their profession in general. And then if you put them in color, I feel like it'd look like a little silly.
Right. Right. So you're right to point that out, right? If you put it in color, they would probably have to take more effort into things like the costumes and things like that, right? The black and white kind of covers that up a little bit. So
I'm back. What are we talking about? Color versus black and white?
Yeah. Yeah, Kyle said that Kyle made the point that he's not the fan of the black and white. Like you're kind of speculating on how would the movie be different if it was in color.
I think really the only true difference that you would really have is just a difference of violence, because I feel like, we get very much, emotions from an actor and just seeing them on screen, but to have them fighting, I feel like there's a huge difference in color and black and white whenever it comes to action sequences, because, you know, black and white, we get that expressiveness through body language. But if we get to see clothing and we get to see blood get on it and, you know, stains and dirt and all that get on color and clothing and stuff like that, I feel like it makes almost a complete world of difference between the two.
I would even add here like the oppressive nature of like how oppressed these people feel and stuff by the bandits. Right. I think the black and white kind of even adds to that dreariness that they all feel. I don't know. What do you think of that, Will?
I will definitely say that black and white adds to dreariness because, as silly as it is to say, we all think about the Great Depression and any time before like the 1970s. We think of that time being in black and white. Like, you know, even just in like the real world, you know, like things happening, we view that history in black and white. You know, because that's just how those eras were, you know, especially like the Great Depression. You know, 1930s films were in black and white, so that's how we get that feeling. But we also just get that begrudgingness of, you know, just the hard times, you know. So we see that history in black and white, and I think that adds to the grudge, like the just, you know, the wading through all the grit and grime of that part of history. So I definitely think black and white adds a lot of just not just dreariness, but just sadness in general to a film, and especially whenever you have like an epic tale like this that does end in sadness, because, you know, we get the end scene where the dead samurai that we have their sword in the ground, and then, you know, they all part ways, and it's like that is just sad, you know. And the black and white definitely adds to that more than I think color would.
Keegan, I'll call on you. You talked about that ending on your discussion post. You want to talk about what you talked about?
I think I said that the samurai didn't even acknowledge the farmers' deaths and just acknowledged their own. I think that played like a conflict between the two groups. They didn't even celebrate either. They were just like, it's their victory, we lost, and they walked away.
Yeah, it was a bit morose, to say the least. I think part of it was they lost the one samurai who we were talking about, who kind of rose in the social ladder. He died. I think they took that one pretty hard.
Kikuchiyo or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the best samurai, by the way. He was the samurai in the movie that was like looking at the enemy and slapping his butt. Good samurai. He's the one that made this movie feel alive, I feel like.
I feel like that too. Yeah.
Yeah. He gave it like that lively feeling to it. I feel like it'd be boring without him.
Yeah, he added a lot of comedy to the movie, which I think was necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely can't have a 3-hour long movie without a little bit of comedy in it, just to break the I don't know, the tension, as it were.
I love when they're recruiting the samurai at the beginning, and you always have somebody like hiding in the corner just to try to hit them when they walk in the room. Right. That was funny. I thought he actually like went down when they hit him.
Yeah, that's another thing that I thought they did really well in this movie, was a good balance of emotions.
Right, you get almost everything here, right? Fear, greed, love,
Yeah,
Hate.
and
hate.
and they do a really good job of separating it too. Like, you know, they have the first night after the bandits attack and they've successfully repelled them, like they're, sitting around resting and they're having an okay time. But like as soon as dawn breaks, it's like into action mode, like ready. And then, after the entire incident is resolved, we have the villagers partying, even though they've had several dead villagers, but they're still alive, so they're celebrating that. But we don't get that with the samurai because they're very just like sad. And it's even said that this was a victory for the farmers, not the samurai. And I think that is more symbolic, not just of those samurai, but I think samurai as a whole. Because they lost some good ones because they were willing to fight for people who didn't offer them glory or a lot of honor or titles. They fought just for the people, which is what the samurai should have been. So I think that him saying that is more symbolic rather of the samurai idea as a whole rather than their actual physical presence.
Right. The fact that the farmers got a victory, right? That might have been contrary to the samurai's best interests, maybe.
Oh, this is off topic a little bit, but the samurai people like in this film, like the regular people, them are the fastest running people I've ever seen in my life. It's like they're running on water. It's crazy.
Claire, your truck is so clean.
Is that noise from Boone?
Yeah.
Yeah. How strange.
Now that Jessica's coming to Williamson, she can kind of shut the door and loudmouth.
I know it. I can't hear today. She must not be here or something.
Oh man.
I know it.
How unfortunate for us.
I want to know who that professor is.
I don't know. Next week, if she's over there, I'll pop my head in and see who it is.
Find out for me.
I
wanna
will.
know. So just before we get cut off, guys, our next film up, I conveniently got the baseball field behind me, right? Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams.
All right, so this movie is very much a melodrama type of movie. Myra, I think you're presenting on it Thursday, so give me your questions at some point tomorrow, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Great film. They just made a big deal about it earlier in the year because they played a baseball game at that field in Iowa. So, the movie came up again because I think it's like the 30th anniversary or something this year. So,
It's been that long since that movie came out?
yep.
Oh my goodness. I'm old. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the Yankees played the White Sox there, I think, earlier this year. So it'll be a good time, good film. It's a magical film in a way, I think. So it's a film that'll never die. It's got the special sauce. So we'll see you guys. We'll see you guys then for that one.